All right, you bunch of wankers, strap yourselves in. We're going deep into some musical bullshit today.
Sounds promising.
We're talking Suede, specifically their 1997 B-sides album, Sci-Fi Lullabies.
Ah, an interesting one.
The album had critics shitting themselves with excitement and fans worshiping the ground Brett Anderson walked on.
Right.
Our mission, if we could be arsed, is to figure out why this collection of, let's be honest, musical scrats is still seen as a fucking masterpiece after all these years.
Yeah.
To help us dig through this pile of sonic gold, we've got a proper expert with us.
Yeah.
Someone who can tell a decent tune from a pile of musical shite.
Glad to be here. And yeah, this album is a fascinating one, not just for Suede fans, but anyone who's curious about how bands used to treat their B-sides. It was a whole different game back then.
Right on. So this thing is massive. 2 discs, 27 tracks. Was this Suede just churning out tunes like a factory or what?
Well, it covers their most creative period, grabbing B-sides from their first 3 albums. And back then, bands like Suede took their B-sides seriously, you know? They saw them as just as important as the main tracks, sometimes even more so.
Really? So they weren't just chucking out half-arsed rejects on the flip side?
No way. For a lot of bands, especially in the Britpop scene, B-sides were their chance to experiment, to show off a bit without the pressure of an album release. And Suede really went for it.
Okay. But there are a bunch of B-sides missing from this thing. Did they run out of space on the CDs?
There are a few missing, yeah, mostly live recordings and covers, but even some original studio tracks didn't make it on, which tells me they were trying to create a certain experience, not just chuck of every B-side they had on there.
So like a best of from their B-sides. That's pretty ballsy. But enough of that. This thing is packed, no doubt. But was it any good? What did the critics say?
Oh, the reviews were amazing. Entertainment Weekly said it had tracks as good as anything on their main albums. The Irish Times basically called it a secret greatest hits. Even AllMusic raved about it, you know, cementing Suede's place as one of the greats of the 90s. A lot of critics were comparing them to the Smiths, who were also known for their awesome B-sides.
Okay, but were American critics just falling for that Britpop sound? What did Suede's home turf think? Were they impressed?
Absolutely. UK critics were blown away. Enemy even said the first disc was good enough to be Suede's 4th album.
No way.
Yeah. Can you imagine a B-sides collection being hailed as a proper album? That's how good this thing is.
Damn. That's got to be some kind of record, right? A B-sides collection being as good as a band's studio albums.
It's pretty rare, to say the least, and it really shows how dedicated Suede were to quality, even for tracks that weren't meant to be singles. Critics, from the AV Club to Stylus magazine, have talked about the effort they put into those B-sides. They weren't filler, they were chances to explore different sounds, to push the boundaries. That's what set them apart from a lot of the other Britpop bands, and why Sci-Fi Lullabies still has such an impact today.
Speaking of impact, let's talk about that album art. It's this stark image of a wrecked plane taken by photographer John Kippen. What's the story there? Just a cool image, or is there something more to it?
Oh, it's not random. The photo's from a military training ground. It puts the beauty of the landscape next to this wrecked plane, you know, hinting at violence.
Right, I see what you're getting at.
It reflects the music. There's beauty and emotion in these B-sides, but there's a dark side too, a rawness. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. There's some heavy stuff in there.
Deep, man. And we can't forget that title, Sci-Fi Lullabies. What the hell does that even mean? Where did they get that from?
Funny enough, it's from a lyric in Introducing the Band off their second album, Dogman Star. They even thought about using Sci-Fi Lullabies for that album's title.
No shit. That's wild.
Makes you think about how the title fits with the whole mood of the album. What do you think of when you hear those words? That's something for you, our dear listener, to think about. But let's get into the music itself, because that's where the real magic is.
That's great.
Let's get down and dirty and dig into some of these tracks, see what makes them so special.
Bloody right. Where do we even start with this massive track list?
We could start with My Insatiable One from the Drowners single, yeah.
Right.
It's a fan favorite, and even Morrissey covered it on his solo tour back in the day. It's got that classic Suede sound.
Sultry vocals, those driving guitars.
Yeah, almost glam rock, and those lyrics about longing and obsession. It's brilliant.
You know, you say classic Suede sound, but for the poor bastards who haven't been indoctrinated into the cult of Suede, how would you describe it? What makes them stand out from all those other Britpop bands?
Good point. It's not easy to pin down, but I'd say it's that mix of glam rock swagger and this raw, kind of sleazy energy that you don't get from many other bands. It's in the music, the way they use those minor chords and build that tension. But it's also in Brett Anderson's voice, you know? That vulnerability, that yearning, it just sucks you in.
Yeah, and My Insatiable One definitely captures that.
Yeah.
It's like a sonic orgy of desire, all dark and delicious. But let's move on. What else you got?
Well, if we're talking about raw energy, we got to mention The Living Dead and Killing of a Flash Boy, both from the Stay Together single. These are staples in their live shows, and for good reason.
Yeah.
They're high-energy anthems that show off the band at their most powerful.
Killing of a Flash Boy is a personal favorite.
Yeah.
That energy makes you want to move, and the lyrics paint such a vivid picture.
They were always great at that, creating these gritty, evocative scenes with their lyrics. It's like watching a film play out in your head.
Okay, so we've got the sexy, the intense, the anthemic. What other flavors of Suede are we getting on this album? Don't tell me it's just one big glam rock wank fest.
Huh. No, it's definitely not one-dimensional. If you want something a bit more introspective, check out To the Birds from the Drowners single. It's a beautiful track, almost melancholic, those soaring vocals and shimmering guitars. It's a side of Suede some people might not be familiar with, but it's just as powerful as their louder stuff.
That's what gets me about this compilation of the range. You've got these hard-hitting bangers right next to these more tender, reflective moments.
Exactly. And they weren't afraid to experiment, push the boundaries a bit. You've got Where the Pigs Don't Fly, which has this almost psychedelic vibe, and then The Big Time, which is just this glam rock stomper. It's a wild ride.
Wait, Where the Pigs Don't Fly? What the fuck is that one about?
It's hard to explain. It's like a surreal stream of consciousness trip through some bizarre landscape, distorted guitars, almost spoken word vocals. This trippy atmosphere, definitely one of their more experimental tracks, but it works.
I'm going to have to give that one another listen, maybe with some mind-altering substances to help me understand those lyrics. So we've covered a lot of ground, but there's another whole disc to go. What are some highlights from disc 2? Any hidden gems we should look out for?
Disc 2 is interesting because it captures their evolution after Bernard Butler left. You start to hear more of Richard Oakes' influence on the guitar, and Neil Cogling's keyboards add this whole new layer.
You feel the shift. Still Suede, but with a new dimension, like they're exploring new sounds.
Absolutely. Tracks like Every Monday Morning Comes and Have You Ever Been This Low show off this more introspective, almost world-weary sound. And then you've got Young Men, which is this big anthemic ballad, almost a nod to their earlier work.
Young Men is fantastic. So much raw emotion.
Absolutely. And we can't forget WSD. It's got this slow burning intensity that builds and builds until it just explodes. A sonic roller coaster.
Damn, I'm getting chills. So we've got the introspective, the anthemic, the explosive. Anything else?
How about some good old-fashioned sleaze?
Always up to that.
Money has this swaggering, almost predatory feel that's pure Suede. And then you've got Jumble Cell Mums, which is just this gloriously messy, tongue-in-cheek romp, impossible not to love.
Jumble Sale Moms. The title alone is enough to grab my attention. What the hell's that one about?
Basically, it's social commentary dressed up as a cheeky pop song, Suede at their most sarcastic, taking the piss out of social climbers and wannabe elites. Classic British cynicism.
Love it. So we've covered a lot, but I'm sure there are some deep cuts on this album we haven't even touched on. What's one track, one hidden gem that you think every listener should seek out?
That's a tough one, but if I had to pick just one, I'd say check out Graffiti Women from the Film Star single. It's this beautiful, haunting ballad that really shows off Anderson's voice, a hidden gem that deserves way more attention.
Right on. Graffiti Women it is. Added to the playlist. And hey, listeners, if you have any favorite deep cuts from Sci-Fi Lullabies, hit us up on social media. We're always up for talking Suede. But for now, let's unpack the legacy of this incredible album. Why are we still talking about it after almost 30 years? What makes it so special? All right, we've spent the last hour with our ears up, Suede's arse, exploring Sci-Fi Lullabies. We've talked tracks, we've wanked over the reviews, we've pretty much creamed our pants over this whole fucking thing. But now, the big question. Why are we still talking about this album after nearly 30 years? What makes this collection of B-sides so special?
Well, for a start, the music is just that good. Like we've been saying, these aren't just chucked away tracks. These are proper songs. They could have easily been on any of their studio albums.
It's like they were giving fans an entire bonus album with every single. It's insane.
Totally. And I think it shows how much bands cared about their B-sides back then. It wasn't just an afterthought. It was a chance to experiment, try new things, give the fans something special.
It's like they were saying, hey, thanks for buying our music. Here's a load of other shit you might like, you lovely bastards.
Exactly. And Sci-Fi Lullabies is a perfect example of that.
Yeah.
It shows Suede's creativity, their work ethic, and how much they wanted to give the fans something truly special.
It's also a reminder that sometimes The best stuff is hidden away. We live in a world of instant gratification where we can get anything we want. But back then, you had to look a bit harder. You had to flip that single over and see what was on the other side.
Yeah.
And with Suede, it was usually gold.
Absolutely. There was that sense of discovery, that excitement of finding these hidden tracks.
Yeah, I miss those days. The thrill of the hunt, the anticipation, and then that moment of pure joy when you find a track that blows you away.
And even though streaming has changed how we listen to music, Sci-Fi Lullabies still works as an album on its own. It's a whole experience with its own mood and atmosphere.
Yeah, it's true. It's not just a random bunch of tracks.
Yeah.
There's a flow to it, a purpose.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so interesting, both for Suede fans and for anyone who wants to understand what B-sides are all about. It proves that these non-album tracks can be just as important as anything on a band's official albums.
Right. I think we squeezed all the juice out of this one. Big thanks to our expert for taking us on this deep dive into the brilliance of Suede's B-sides.
It's been a pleasure.
And to you, our listeners, thanks for joining us on this musical adventure. Now go out there and explore Suede's B-sides. You might just discover your new favorite song. Until next time, stay curious and keep those B-sides spinning. Peace out, you bunch of wankers.